Have you also been sucked into the CK3 hype? I've been playing so much Crusader Kings 3 recently, and it's absolutely brilliant. It is overwhelming, it is complex. I have no idea what I'm doing, and the most asked question that I have in the game is, who are you? Because there are so many characters and I just don't know who they are. I have no idea. But hey, lots of changes happened. The patch 1.1, it is absolutely incredible. Look at this. So this is on the official forum. Spoiler patches. Please look at the scroll bar here on the side. Yep. That's a long list to read. And I'm gonna do that because I thought, who seriously wants to go through all of these changes and read them? We all don't want to, right? Let's be honest. If you see this, all of this, you take a step back and you think, yeah, no, you know what? I'm just gonna play and I'll probably find the changes, right? Probably. Although, with that extensive list, unlikely, actually. Unlikely. So I thought, listening to something is always a bit nicer. Why not? I read it for you. And you just sit back and relax and have fun there. Let's start with game balance. A woman being close to fertility cut-off cap 3 years now gives a low fertility marriage penalty. Being unable to inherit titles no longer blocks claim inheritance. The castrated, bastard, and disinherited trait still block claim inheritance. Only from within your dynasty for disinherited. Building a new temple now gives much more piety. You can't do it too often anyways. Cities and temples now follow the same cost scale as castles. Clan rulers now desire fewer spouses the lower their tiers. The piety penalty only triggers if they are below desired spouses. The numbers are Baron, Count, once 1, Dukes 2, Kings 3, and Emperors 4. The piety hit from being below desired spouses has been doubled. Confederate partition now ignores land held by vassals with title allegiance when there's titles with their own separate succession, e.g., elective titles, titles with their own gender laws. This means no more creating a kingdom where all the vassals will go with another title. Courtiers you have a kid with are now slightly more likely to stick around. Creating a title will now cause vassals de jure under it to lose title allegiance if that allegiance is to a title of the same tier. E.g., creating the Empire of Italy as the HRE will cause the Italian vassals to lose allegiance to the HRE. Denying call to arms now costs fame, potentially reducing your level of fame. Denying offensive wars has a similar impact, but denying defensive calls has a massive impact. Denying a defensive war now reduces opinion with your ally by -50 for 25 years, decaying. Denying an offensive war now reduces opinion with your ally by -20 for 5 years, decaying. Slash the opinion modifier from diplomacy by half. Diplomacy skill now gives a prestige mold % with offset. Electors should now be less inclined to form or join independence factions unless they're another faith than their liege. Fixed pregnancy chance remaining unchanged for significant fertility spans before dropping drastically. Now the reduction in pregnancy chance is gradual instead. E.g., before the couple's fertility dropping from 53% to 52% would cause the chance of pregnancy to drop from 3% to 2% per month, while now it will go from 2.52% to 2.47%. For player cultures, the culture head now updates within a month when one ruler becomes bigger than another. For player dynasties, the dynast now takes at most 1 month to update when someone else becomes more than 10% stronger rather than up to a year. Giving away a holding of the wrong type as an ambitious or greedy character will no longer incur stress. Greedy gift receivers now no longer demand insane amounts of additional gold. The AI is now much more likely to demand the conversion of heretical vassals if their refusal would result in them being marked as criminals. This should make the AI less likely to collapse to heresy. Heresiarchs will no longer accept demands of conversion. Denying a conversion request now gives the liege a revoke reason, in addition to the imprisonment reason they already got. Outbreaks of heresy now increase the fervor of the affected faith much more positively. This means that large faiths are more likely to bounce back to max fervor after a heresy outbreak. If a vassal asks for something in return for you asking them to convert faith, denying their request no longer gives you an imprisonment revoke reason on them. You being impious but not parting with simple material wealth. If you have petition and your primary title has special election form, the heir to that title will be the primary heir for your petition and get a share as long as they're a valid player heir, even if they otherwise wouldn't have been part of the petition or later in the petition order. Increase cooldown on asking vassal to convert faith to 15 years. Inheritance succession can now go up to 6 generations upwards to find a distant relative rather than just 3. It is now harder to murder someone you're at war with or murder the vassal courtiers. The maximum success chance secrecy of abduct schemes are now 85%, down from 95%. It is now practically impossible to abduct someone you're at war with a lesser penalty to their vassals' courtiers. It is now much harder to scheme to abduct rulers, especially foreign rulers, and subjects of foreign court. Knights will more often gain prowess and blade master traits in battle. Large realms are now unlikely to convert religion in wars. Lowered the attack stat of pikemen. Lower the recruitment cost of man-at-arms. Made a number of interactions unavailable if you're at war with a target, e.g., it makes no sense to ask the Pope for money while you're at war with her. Made diplomacy affect the opinion gained from gifts much more, times 3. Military prestige, piety, maintenance cost no longer reduced your fame, devotion gain. Opinion from multiple elective titles no longer stack for each title with a law. It happens once per vassal based on their title allegiance's law. Outnumbering the enemy now further increases the survivability of your knights. The patronymics are now a bit more stable at game start. Rebalance debt so that it now comes in levels. The higher the level, the harsher the penalties. Penalties include levy reductions to make severely indebted realms collapse easier. Reclusive characters will no longer host feasts. Remove the stress loss for lustful characters when renouncing celibacy, as it could lead to free stress loss. Significantly nerf the resurging Sauerschind modifier. Slightly reduce the cost of main holdings. Vastly empower the Mongol Empire's armies. Now you will truly learn to fear the horsemen of the steppe. Temujin and Co. now starts off with substantial prowess scores. Temujin now starts with a full roster of knights, as well as a few Han siege engineers. The Mongol Empire is now much more aggressive and will attack several times per year if opportunity arises. Weak realms are now much more likely to agree to subjugation by the Mongol Empire. The Borgigan dynasty is no longer obscure and starts with a few warfare legacies unlocked. Asked to take the vows cooldown is increased to 10 years. Asked to take the vows now costs piety to use rather than giving you piety. Asked to take the vows improves the opinion of your court chaplain and head of faith when used. The take the vows interaction can now be used on characters of 10 years or older, used to be only adults. The take the vows interaction can now be used on characters that stand to inherit titles. This means that it's possible to prune your petition inheritance by disinheriting children using this tool. The EI acceptance values of asked to take the vows have been massively reworked to take many things into account. Most notably, having a learning education makes children much more likely to want to go to church. Using asked to take the vows on someone now moves them away from your court into the court of a theocrat in the realm, if there is one, or into the pool. You cannot force characters married, betrothed, in the incorrect lineality to take the vows. EI, women in a patrilineal marriage. You now need a strong hook to force acceptance of asked to take the vows. Weak hooks give a bit of acceptance instead. The AI is now more inclined to buy certain man-at-arms based on their culture. The AI is now more inclined to recruit their cultural man-at-arms. The AI is now much more likely to request money from the head of faith, especially if the head of faith is very rich. The AI is now reluctant to betroth boys to all women, regardless of them sharing their dynasty or not. The AI now only wants to spend money on recruiting guest claimants that have claims in bordering realms. The AI, primarily war defenders, will now consider white peace more often to avoid dragging wars on needlessly. They'll look at how long the war has lasted for and compare that to their current war score. This should reduce the number of extremely drawn-out wars. The AI will now account for bankruptcy when considering white peace. Starting at -100 gold, the AI will then progressively pursue white peace more as they fall deeper into depth, -2 years of income and -4 years of income. Offsetting this by how close they are to winning, at 80 or above war score, the AI will try to toughen it out as the winnings from the war is more likely to outweigh the expenses of maintaining the army. The AI will now only demand conversion from vassals if they have the money to pay the demands, if the vassal is unlikely to simply accept straight up. The AI will now take age and fertility into account when marrying away any character of reputable house, not only their own. This should make it less likely for interesting characters to end up in fruitless marriages. The exclave independence game rule now triggers closer to succession for AI rulers. The inbred trait is now much less likely to be inherited, but further reduces fertility. The renown gain from alive dynasty members is now capped at 2 per month, 100 alive members. The strong blood dynasty modifier now only improves the chance of characters with no inherited genetic traits getting a +1 by 400% rather than 40,000%. Plus 400% means that the chance of getting comely, for instance, is 2.5% instead of 0.5%. The hold of Jerusalem is unlikely to accept populist demands. The opinion hit from being unallied as a clan vassal has been increased to 15 for non-powerful vassals and 30 for powerful vassals. Titles automatically destroyed due to a ruler getting unlanded now gives the ruler's claims if they received a claim on the counties they lost. Tags are now more likely to assimilate to local cultures than they were. Under petition, higher tier titles no longer reduce the number of counties you get. In practice, what this tends to mean is that in some, but not all cases, where your primary heir would get only 1 or 2 counties, they get 1 more. Very non-zealous characters will now revoke titles from other faith vassals, if that be the best for the realm, presuming that there is no tyranny loss. Viking vassals are now more restricted when it comes to overseas conquests. Wandering characters who decide to marry will now prefer to marry a character traveling with them rather than creating a spouse. Winning a great holy war as the attacker now refills all the levies and garrisons in the counties taken. Wounded knights are now less likely to die in battle. You can now manage to focus on your children even if they're landed, as long as you're their liege. You may now revoke the last county of someone who holds a duchy or higher that is impossible to revoke, e.g. a head of faith title. That will lead to that higher title getting destroyed. You must be at peace to create a new faith. Your liege now gets opinion of predecessor towards your heir when you die, if they end up your heir's liege and your heir had no liege or a different liege. Wandering characters with absurd amounts of gold will now tend to spend it all on improving themselves. No more inviting wanderers with 7,000 gold and banishing them. Added more restrictions to the check for if characters are willing to cheat on their partners. Allied culture now starts with compound bows researched in 867 as well as 1066. Germania can no longer be created by spiritually headed Christians who must create the HRE instead. Increase the level of splendor gain from the dynasty of many crowns, decision from 75 to 1000. Increase the area of Stammesherzogtum to include parts of Bavaria and northern Germany, so all German cultures are able to gain the innovation. Increase the base fortification slightly for castle holding upgrades. Intimidated vassals are now slightly less deterred from joining factions. Jarl Hasten now starts at fame level 5 instead of 6. Made the religious construction county modifier focus more on bonuses for temple holdings specifically instead of development in general. Nerf the supplies siege event to grant a total of 20% siege progress down from 40%. Peasant leaders now get a discount on raised levy maintenance, making popular revolts less likely to succumb to crippling debt. Peasant and populist faction leaders now gain gold contributions from faction members when war is declared, so that they can pay army maintenance. The gold is removed once the war has ended. Reduce the chance of children reincarnating with an ancestor's sinful personality traits. Removed claimants with pressed claims from the pool of potential court physicians. Removed extra 6th holy site of Alexandria from Baptism. Removed extra 6th holy site of Weiden and Kisi from Sigwick and Bedaic faiths, respectively. Restricted the intrigue scheming event, confused heritage to players only, as the AI was going a bit wild with it and turning everyone into bastards unnecessarily. The AI is now less likely to want to spend gold on guests during war and when their coffers are running low. The AI should be now more inclined to build castle holding upgrades. The regional innovation, Stammesherzogtum, now also reduces the likelihood of that vassals will join independence factions. There is now a 5 to 10 year grace period on game start before populist factions will form. Vassals are now increasingly likely to join factions the more in debt the liege is. Sprorinosh men-at-arms now counter pikemen in addition to archers. Restoring the HRE is now easier and more rewarding, while still requiring a decent amount of prestige, realm size, and controlled kingdoms. Independence faction now has domains of all faction members as war goal. When you successfully ask a vassal to end an offensive war, the defender now gets a small opinion bonus towards you. The maximum penalty for being over your domain limit is now minus 100% taxes, levies, increased from minus 90%. If you vastly exceed your domain limit for more than 1 year, the grace period for new inheritances, conquests, all buildings will deactivate until your domain limit is lowered. AI. Discourage the AI from doing naval invasions when land invasions are feasible. Gave the AI dancing lessons. Gave the AI some self-confidence lessons. Just because its liege is a complete coward, it doesn't mean it should avoid making or joining factions. It should only do so if they themselves are cowed. Increase the AI willingness to spend on duchy capital buildings. Inform the AI of the existence of the player when it is trying to spread out to avoid attrition. Inform the AI that if it has nothing else to do in a war, it might as well defend the war goal. Russian Vikings are now much more unlikely to conquer overseas. Should now be better at merging small army stacks. Stanley told the AI that when it's trying to support the player, it shouldn't try to retreat just because the enemy is coming right at it, except if it hasn't yet arrived at the player's location. Taught the AI how to count. It will now, when deciding whether to raise its troops, consider all its troops, not just its levies. So it won't refrain from raising its troops just because its levies alone would be pointless to raise. Taught the AI to be a bit better at avoiding pushing third-party claims that will lead to the claimant going independent. It's still happy to push such claims for close family members. The AI is more likely to acquiesce to a faction demand when they're deep in debt. The AI is no longer more eager to join a claimant faction if the claimant is close to death, but instead less likely. The AI is now more likely to create holy orders, but gets less likely to do so the more holy orders a faith has. The AI no longer minds matrilineal marriages for men and patrilineal marriages for women in most cases when those marriages are within the same dynasty. The AI now wants to recruit guests that they have a positive relationship with, for example, friends or lovers. The AI should no longer attempt to call the player in against their own heir or spouse. They wouldn't accept, so they should presume the player wouldn't either. The AI should no longer bother the player with offensive call to arms if they're the primary defender in a war. The AI will now properly revoke holy order leases if they're of another faith. The AI will now use ask to take the vows under certain circumstances. The AI will now wait longer to send a new ransom request to the player after the previously denied one. The distance the AI is willing to raid is now based on its tier. Told the AI it might as well support the player if there's no enemies around as long as there's enemies somewhere, rather than running off on its own to go siege something. Told the AI that considering the threat of enemies when you're at sea makes some sense even if they can't get to you while you remain at sea. Told the AI that counting the player's enemies twice if they're movement locked and trying to decide if the player needs help or not might lead to some silly decisions. Told the AI that hunting down enemy armies and enemy territories is a good idea if it is safe to do so, even if it is currently in a defensive mode. Told the AI that it is a good idea to raise more troops when it already has troops raised. Told the AI that it might actually be a good idea to try to avoid running into enemy units while raiding. Told the AI that it really doesn't make any sense to try to retreat from a dangerous enemy while at sea. Told the AI that it shouldn't bother sending troops to the player while the player is just moving around at sea. Only once the player is standing still or making landfall does support make much sense. Told the AI that it's fine to hunt down enemy armies that aren't in either the attacker or defender's territory. Told the AI that just because it thinks a battle is about equal, that doesn't mean it should refrain from piling more troops into it to be 100% sure. Told the AI that maybe it shouldn't pretend it can't see your units when it actually can, due to you being in or on the border of its liege's territory. Told the AI that when deciding where to raid, it might make sense to measure the distance by sea, not as the crow flies. Told the AI that when it has decided to either retreat or stand on fight, there is no point doing other things like hunting nearby enemy units or trying to merge with a friendly stack. Told the AI that when supporting the player while the player is at sea, it makes sense for it to go to the same province rather than stay on land. Told the AI to not bother pushing the claims of vassals. Its direct vassals, and its courtiers should be plenty. Vikings should now mostly prefer to conquer contiguous areas overseas. The vassals can still go their own way though. When granting titles, the AI now has a small preference for giving away titles it more recently acquired, instead keeping its older titles. Interface. Add a situation warning you of when a vassal may leave your realm due to inheriting a foreign title. Add character list filters for not my faith, not my religion, not my culture group, has no claims, has claims on me, and not player dynasty. Add developer Easter egg character portraits to the credits view. Added a current situation item for vassals that could be granted to the rightful liege. Added a descriptive text in the dynasty view that tells how you plan it. Added a game concept for gifts. Added a warning suggestion in the current situation list for when having too few wives. Added an alert for when your primary heir is of another dynasty and you don't have any member of yours in the current succession line. Added game concept for the unreformed pagan combat bonus, making it clear that it only applies to counties of one's own faith. Added missing plus sign in tooltips about X's opinion of you 50. Added shortcut listings for the encyclopedia and character finder. Added war start date to war tooltip. Added warnings to the take vows interactions about kicking out potentially useful people. Allow left mouse drag in dynasty tree. Change the name of the vassal contract modification confirmation interaction from modify to modify vassal contract. Clicking a region in the cultural innovation tooltip now highlights it on the map. Clicking on the checkbox or label will now also register the allow marriage button. Contribution scores are no longer shown for GAW participants who can't have them. Crown Authority tooltip only shows cost of locked levels. Deceased rulers no longer shown an heir in the character window. Directed GHWs now have a more accurate victory message. Disallow wasting a hook used in a feudal contract negotiation if it's already fair or in favor of the vassal. Display text in the realm view when the player has no vassals. Don't show rally map icons on water, they are never valid there. Faith doctrine names should now be tooltippable in far more cases. Fixed borders not always being cleared when they could be. Fix the rally point icon when placing or moving rally points from blocking the click to actually move them if not hitting the map. Fix weak hooks suggesting you can force someone into a faction when the interaction requires a strong one. Fixed opinion of liege and characters list entries not providing a breakdown when tooltipped. Fixed kinswoman and kinsman in some cases being swapped. Fixed call to war and offer to join war interfaces in some cases, selecting wars that cannot be selected. Now only auto-selects if there is only one war and it can be selected. Fixed a handful of cases where localization would treat other players in multiplayer as if they are you. Fixed a misplaced space in the scheme success chance breakdown. Fixed a number of cases where coats of arms could end up blank. Fix a superfluous education trait entry in the encyclopedia. Fix a variety of interface functionality treating sessions where people can hot join, but there's just one player, as if they're an actual multiplayer session. Could cause things like the player map mode to appear. Fix baronies showing up in the ask for claim interaction. Fix broken tooltips in the battle events list in the battle summary. Fix dead popes being called king bishops. Fix deleting a rally point not fully deselecting it, leading to clicking another rally point in the military view, in some cases simply panning to that rally point without opening the rally point window. Fix directed GHWs, e.g. jihads, showing incorrect war chest shares and scores for the person winning. Fixed directed GHWs showing war score share rather than rank. Fixed doctrine tooltips in the faith view, linking the doctrine itself, leading to pointless recursion. Fixed dynasty modifier icons sticking around in the dynasty window after the modifier has been removed. Fixed education focus icons in their tooltip lighting up on hover as if they were buttons. Fixed faith doctrines in the encyclopedia and similar on the main menu, sometimes saying all blank rather than all adherents. Fixed faith hostility description evil and hostile not being tooltippable in some places. Fixed it not being possible to filter by traits in the spouse interface that aren't shown, e.g. filtering by specific education. Fixed links being unclickable in some tooltips. Fixed links in the console output being unclickable. Fixed mercenary troops not getting accounted for in a number of military strength breakdowns. Fixed missing culture names in Guardian-Ward interactions. Fixed pushing the claim of a courtier saying they stay your vassal rather than become your vassal. Fixed regnal numbering failing in some cases when names contain non-ASCII characters. Fixed some of the things that can block changing a focus not showing up in red with a warning symbol. Fixed succession UI saying from realms blank rather than from realms petition succession. Fix the child has no reason to say it court message claiming the child is your stepbrother or sister rather than child. Fix the realm will lose land when vassal dies alert showing up in some cases where the land won't actually leave the realm since the heir will become your vassal. Fix the powerful vassal text in the vassals list not having a tooltip. Fix the allow marriage checkbox. Fix the claimants list for titles in some cases, including people who don't actually have a claim on that title. Fix the expose secret interaction, showing the effects of the blackmail interaction. Fix the find concubine window in some cases, showing someone who is already your concubine. Fix the select beneficiary having a game concept on the send interaction button, making it hard to click. Fix the effects description not having a game concept for beneficiary. Fix the achievements box in the game rules window, only having a tooltip on the achievements not available text rather than the whole area. Fix the center of the resign from council button not being clickable. Fix the character portrait in the load game window highlighting when you put your mouse over it as if it were a button. Fix the character window strength breakdown listing attackers, defenders, allies military strength rather than simply allies military strength. Fix the combat predictor in some cases ignoring some of your armies, thus predicting far worse odds than reality. Fix the declare war tooltip in the war declaration screen telling you about things blocking the war declaration twice. Fix the election candidate view showing the health icon twice on candidates. Fix the game pretending you could swap councillors and then doing nothing when you click the button in cases where the current councillor isn't eligible for the other's council position. Now it will say reassign instead and lead to the current councillor being fired. Fix the game sometimes claiming a marriage has no chance of children despite both parties being fertile. Fix the game sometimes saying that the development progress will change by X when it'll actually decrease by X. Fix the hotkeys for the map modes hidden under additional map modes not working in the lobby. Fix the math sometimes overflowing for combat predictions for large battles, leading to it just saying the odds are even despite them being anything but. Fix the prestige icon in an arranged marriage view causing the prestige tooltip rather than the prestige game breakdown tooltip. Fix the progress bar under total soldiers in the military view not having a tooltip, now gives the same tooltip as the label above it. Fix the rally point progress bar occasionally going off screen. Fix the realm name of dead rulers being misplaced. Fix the religion filters and similar for character lists not always working, was for instance broken in the election window. Fix the tooltip for the achievements icon in the character selection covering the Iron Man checkbox. Fix the unit banner for stationary units turning invisible when you have the war overview window open. Fix the victory screen of directed GHWs saying you didn't participate enough rather than showing your participation rank. Fix titles sometimes showing up twice in the title finder. Fixed traits with gendered names such as pretty, having their names based on the target rather than the schema in romance games. Fixed troop counts being massively wrong until you unpause. Now they'll only be a bit off, since a lot of things can change on the first day. Fixed unpause tooltip in single player, sometimes saying game is paused by unknown. Fixed word salad in the level of Splendor toasts. Fix you in some cases getting a "your child can marry" notification for someone you have no power to marry off. Fix your heir display taking a day to update after your heir dies, now instant for player heirs. Got rid of strange glow on the "no character selected" portrait when creating a claimant faction. Hovering over options in the drop-downs in the barbershop will now show the resulting change on your character model, no more having to click through the options one by one. Improved consistency between call to war and offer to join war interfaces. Improved the look of faction entries when the faction is at war to push its demands. Improved tooltip placement in the title window for the titles in the de jure part of list and the de jure hierarchy list in the holding view. In the character view, hovering over the military strength of the character will now list knights with their cultural name rather than yours. Invalid save games can be toggled on or off when the save window is up. Knights no longer have such a disproportionate effect on army quality levels. This has no impact on gameplay, just makes the quality level more representative of the actual effectiveness of the army. Level of Splendor triggers now correctly show the name rather than just a number. Made it clear in the knight game concept that knights represent both the character and their retinue of troops. A knight isn't single-handedly causing 30 casualties. Make sure absolute control is displayed correctly in the domain tab. Make sure the friends panel can be expanded if at 8 or more. Make sure the page number and close button are not drawn over each other in tutorial windows. Make sure the right mouse button is registered when clicked to pan to the army from the outliner. Make sure the views on a faith are not shown when the player hasn't selected a character yet. Make sure the switch between click to show hide on the tooltip for notifications. Minor GHW layout improvement. Only show the click to unlock text and lifestyle perks if it's available. Only show the continue button if the credits list is still scrolling. Only show the map icon and progress bar for tasks that have a counselor appointed to it. Only show the select button in the multiplayer lobby if the game has not been started yet. Opening a dynasty tree now pans to you if you're in it, otherwise it pans to the dynast or the founder if it is a dead dynasty. Outdated information should no longer stick around in the character window. Peasant and populist revolts will no longer get dynasty-based names for governments that use such names. Potential scheme agents with positive acceptance score are now listed as will join rather than can be convinced. Remove double toast when a dynasty member makes a cat at house. Remove starting fervor info from the faith creation screen. It does not vary, so it is unnecessary information. Remove the description for secondary characters on the bookmarks screen. Remove dagger icon next to scheme start effects to make it less awkward when used with personal schemes. Scheme agent acceptance tooltip now shows the full breakdown directly in the list. Select the correct text flavorization when a title can't be granted. Shift plus F11 will now generate a picture of your current map mode and put in your screenshots folder. Show a message in the window when you have no vassals and are about to convert to a new faith. Sort by name for knights in the battle result window now uses first names instead of title names. Stop showing the opinion of players of the faction targeted when creating a claimant faction. Successful conversion is now sent as a message rather than a toast. The Allow Marriage button in the interaction list now looks far less out of place, and the full button is tooltippable. The pending Crusade participation alert now only shows up if the head of faith would actually be upset at you for not participating. The Will Not Accept icon and tooltip now only shows up on interactions where there's no combination of options that will lead to the recipient accepting. No more Will Not Accept on ransom when they'll gladly accept as long as you're willing to pay. The Alliance Expired message now shows clickable links for the characters' names. The AI trying to ransom itself from your prison will no longer be called Ransom Yourself. The Appoint a Counselor window now no longer appears under other windows until clicked. The Great Holy War interface now tells you how much of the war chest you'll get when the war begins. The Hijai version of the Pilgrim trait now has unique art. The Muslim caliphates are now named Sunni Caliphate, and such rather than Abbasid. The Romans interaction now uses the correct notification header. The success chance and secrecy modifiers are now not shown for discovered schemes to prevent being able to deduce who's scheming against you, only total chance is shown. The army tooltip now shows commander advantage rather than marshal. The automatic pausing from having died no longer gets unpaused when you dismiss the succession screen. You now have to manually unpause instead. The battle predictor is no longer as pessimistic about your odds. Now a predicted 50% edge is enough to get you'll probably win, while before you needed a 133% edge. The other categories have had their thresholds tweaked as well. The breach siege event pictures now have the correct aspect ratio and properly updates to show the different breach levels. The character relation description will now include spouses and concubines of landed rulers. The concubine and blackmail interactions now show all their effects. The faction interface now clearly shows who has been blocked temporarily from joining a faction and until when. The game will no longer claim that your guest claims on a title that's already in your realm or which has no holder is useful. The House and Dynasty view now looks nicer for houses and dynasties with no living members. The lost title section in the ruler transition window is no longer shown where there is no lost titles and is expanded by default. The on-map council task icons are now always shown when you have the council window open. The raid loot info now shows up in province tooltips when you have a raid selected rather than a raid army. Track decisions now show as alerts instead of in the suggestion dropdown. Unit movement arrows are more visible when moving through heavily forested provinces. When a war goal has multiple options, e.g. claim wars, holy wars, those are now sorted by tier than roughly by distance from your realm rather than in arbitrary order. When looking at the list of knights and potential knights only have the portrait darkened rather than the entire entry, so it no longer looks as if buttons like Recruit to Court are grayed out. When revoking a title, the new domain size is shown correctly now. When viewing a battle you're not involved in, it will no longer say, it's your commander and your realm. You can now hover over innovations in modifier breakdowns, e.g. manoralism in the building cost breakdown, to see the full info on the innovation. You can now queue movement waypoints for gathering armies using shift rather than being limited to just the shortest available path. You no longer get the dangerous faction alert for a faction that's at war with you. The ongoing war is presumably enough of a tell. You now get a notification in the lower right corner when a part of your realm gets sieged by someone you're hostile to. Improved bookmark screen, scaling on different aspect ratios. Fixed missing description in secret exposed notification. Don't show the cost of removing a title law if there's no cost. New stress indicator look and placement. Fixed various text overflow issues with localized text. Added visible close button to toasts. More info for pinned characters in outliner. Fixed an issue where sinful and virtuous traits were not highlighted in the character window. Clearer state of army in army view. More feedback on pause unpause. Art. Added ethnicities for East African, South Indian and Slavic and Arctic circumpolar. Added lightning for Corridor Night event background. Fixed COA that was showing debug pink. Large map names look better at small cost to tiny map names. Tweak to Knights Templar coat of arms. Updated some character portraits in the credits list. Fixed a large amount of portrait clipping issues between clothing, headgear and hair. Lowering some headgears to better rest on a character's head rather than floating. Improved teenager animations to not be neutral but also show more personality like adults. Adjusted animations to cause less intersections. Increased map readability by changing the color slightly for titles that had similar or the same color. Visual map improvements in the African region. Fixed a number of lakes floating around. Added FXAA as an anti-aliasing option. Improved visuals of bookmark screen, new game, and main menu. Fixed some errors in the bookmarks map. Front-end menus have been tidied up. New siege window layout and art. Improved HUD visuals. Color-coded education trait icons. Increased contrast of character portraits. Cleaned up file structure. War overview now looks cooler. Culture window looks cooler too. Great Holy War is actually great. Culture icons are now unified to always display as a candle. Added Easter egg DNA for Henrik Pharaohs, Debbie Lane, Hannah Lohman, Maximilian Olbers, Bianca Zavazzi. Localization. More flavorful description added for when murder by hunting accident. Added vote strength to game concept. Added a first-person present tense text for the joint faction effect. Added an alternative text for Holy War if one has the pluralist doctrine. Added clarification on the modifier text for the condottieri innovation. Added description for Parliament special building. Added dynasty names. Added localization for Yazidi, Bishop, and Theocracies. Added missing character name to Bastardry Reveal event. Added missing whitespace in Fabricate Hook event titles. Added some missing perspectives for effects. Added some uppercase lock commands for cases where a U is displayed instead of a name. Added text for the first-person version of losing one's guardian. Added the alternate localization ritual suicide for non-Christian faiths with the consolamentum tenet. Children who reincarnate as an ancestor with sinful traits now acknowledge that it isn't actually a good thing. Clarified some of the information in the reactive advice about education. Clarified the effect of the perks Sound Foundations and Friendly Counsel. Clarified the effect of the Found New Kingdom Empire decisions. Correct lock command for seduction tooltip if you're already friends. Corrected a few befriend events that did not start with an uppercase letter. Dynasty prefixes and effects and decisions are now more consistent. Fixed a broken game concept in a pluralist doctrine tooltip in German. Fixed a bunch of grammar and typos. Fixed a capitalization error in one of the female South Slavic names. Fixed a number of typos and grammar issues. Fixed a recursive max recursion depth recursion bug in the event No Time for Myself. Fixed a scope mismatch in the lower reveal event, which caused the event to describe people having affairs with themselves. Fixed a scope mismatch in the lover reveal event, which caused the event to describe people having affairs with themselves. Fixed an error that caused rulers to use their own name instead of the name of the potential spouse on some marriage acceptance breakdowns. Fixed an error that caused the consecrate bloodline decision to refer to the papacy himself. Fixed error that would occasionally cause titles to be presented as '(S) primary title. Fixed grammatical error in their Great Holy War victory description. Fixed several minor grammatical errors. Fixed the missing text for polyamory tenet compatibility. Fixed a tooltip for the war chest distribution. Fixed typo in shunned game concept text. Improved the text of the secret revealed event for lovers. Learning requirement for temporal condemnation is now shown as an int. Rename the West African culture group to Guinean. Reduce the Foul Feast event text so no scroll is required in the English version. Removed the tooltip link in Great Holy War dynamic titles. Removed unused strings from Hastings bookmark. Rename the Initiate Consolamentum decision to Initiate Endura to be more correct. Rename the temporal condemnation interaction to condemn sins so it's a verb like other interactions. Rename the Wendish Empire to the Southern Baltic Empire. The greeting in the secret documents letter is now more mysterious. The tooltip for candidates in an elective succession now correctly displays the name of the candidate instead of the person who nominated them. Updated tutorial text. Updated localization for using a strong hook on someone. Updated the building localization so that the text colors are consistent among all building entries in the encyclopedia. Updated the confirmation button name for the Dynasty of Many Crowns decision. Update the cultural titles for Iranian culture group rulers, including unique titles for Muslim and non-Muslim rulers. Updated the description for bastard secrets to fix possible grammatical issues for certain scopes. Updated the description for bastard secrets to fix possible grammatical issues for certain scopes. And yes, that's actually twice here. Updated the error messages for incompatible tenets when creating a new faith. Update the event text for and responsibility to accurately use the player character's gender. Update the event text for twist of fate for when your dead heir was already an equal or higher tier ruler than your current character. Updated the explanation for fervor's impact on popular opinion. Updating the name of Tengrism's religious group from shamanic to steppe to be more consistent with the naming scheme of other religions. Updating the name of the Crusader King trait for Muslims. Updating the name for C. Hordelandi and B. Son Hordelandi. Updated the tooltip for divine marriage to clarify how it works. Updated the tooltip for when powerful vassals block a succession law change. Various typos and grammar issues fixed. Various typos fixed in traits and interactions. Added localization to some triggers that were missing it. Game content. Add define for the desired number of spouses in polygamous faiths allows to specify the value per primary title tier level. Added a new Arya culture, men-at-arms for Iranian cultures. Added a new suggestion to recruit men-at-arms when a player has fewer regiments than expected for their rank. Added a notification toast when your liege changes to inform you who your new liege is and why they became your new liege. Added animations, AI balancing, localization, and other small things to martial events. Added more mythological names for war horses and added animations to events. Removed traits that were unused. Reviving Taltuism now allows you to choose between vanilla Taltuism and swapping out one tenet for a scripted alternative whilst promulgating the restoration. Reviving Taltuism will now convert Maya group counties more generously, especially in Moya areas with less German influence. Update the established Batrican supremacy to have more accurate and easier to understand requirements. Update the martial lifestyle event Under Siege. Added the apostate nickname when reviving Taltuism. Made reviving Taltuism more visible, flexible, and meaningfully challenging. User modding. Image equals blah now works in combat effects. Add can declare war trigger to see if a character can attack another character for a set of titles using a CB with an optional claimant. Add console command to dump out landed title hierarchy from barons up the de jure lieges. Add current day trigger. Add current month trigger. Add holder ignore head of faith requirement, which will suppress the head of faith warnings in history when giving someone a title, useful to resent a historical person holding a head of faith title due to conversion or other representation but not affecting actual gameplay. Add player heir, order of succession type. It will always grab the player heir of the person evaluating the succession. Add set mother effect to change the mother of a character. Added faith doctrine get name no tooltip. Get name now is tooltipable. Added add piety no experience and add prestige no experience effects to add lose to them while not changing the persistent experience gain. Added console command print naval distance to find the naval distance between two provinces. Added console commands pause on, save on, and pause and save on. These force the game to pause and or save at a specific date or when a specific event triggers for any character in the game. Added define AI use vassal of vassal claims. Added define debt modifier thresholds. Debt now gives a character modifier based on this as well as a combat modifier. Added define marriage owner is matchmaker. That lets the AI logic for marrying skip the interaction redirect logic when figuring out who he can marry off. As long as that matches the actual redirect logic for the actor, the result is the same but faster. Added define max heirs and line of succession tooltip. Added define max monthly prestige gain from alive members. Added define max quality power mold. Added effect generate building. Added effect set can be named after dynasty equals no to suppress such naming for titles. You can also put can be named after dynasty equals no in the title definition for historical titles. Added global data system promote get geographical region, e.g. get geographical region, brackets, World Europe West Iberia, brackets closed, get name. Added graphics defines prestige level path, dynasty prestige level path, and piety level path. Added link activity for getting the activity a character is participating in. Added link house founder. Added link last house head, same as house head, if there is one. But if the house is dead, it will give you the last person to be head of it. Added on action, on concubinage end. Added on vassal gained on action. Added tab complete for virtually every console command where that makes sense, e.g. add trait, show title, change culture. Added title transfer type, swear fealty. Added trait flag, blocks from claim inheritance, yes, and blocks from claim inheritance from dynasty. Being unable to inherit titles no longer blocks claim inheritance. Added trigger debt level. Added trigger has relation to, matching the data function has relation to. Added triggers AI reserved gold and AI war chest. Allow title laws to define if they are shown in the title law UI or not. Allow title laws to define when they can be removed or not. Disable the use of the inheritance and abdication title transfer reasons, as using them could break a variety of things. Dynamic descriptions now log when they make use of lock that does not exist. Eliminated break effect.
Enable the AI to use scripted GUIs based on the AI is valid and AI chance in definitions. By default, a scripted GUI will not be used. Fix copying coat of arms only working across the same scope types. Can now correctly copy from a title to a title to a dynasty, etc. Fix set title name and reset title name not updating the name on the map instantly. Fix some in-game coat of arms not refreshing the shown texture when given a new coat of arms by effect. Fixed adding an is shown to a council task not actually hiding it in the council window when not fulfilled. Fixed grant titles interactions effect being applied after the titles are given out rather than before. Fix the game crashing or presenting other issues if you try to create a title with no tier, barony title, or county tier. This creation will now get outright blocked. Fix the vassal count trigger having the behavior of the domain size trigger rather than actually checking the vassal count. Fix the title will leave sub-realm on succession not properly accounting for heirs changing liege due to inheriting a higher tier title. Gaining a title you have an explicit claim on no longer causes the non-explicit claim lost on action. Important action now support icon equals blah. Improved performance of character to title neighboring, character to title neighboring and across water county, neighboring realm same rank owner, and neighboring and across water realm same rank owner. Remove court physician as being a required cache scripted relation. Remove friend and lover as being required cache scripted relations. Removed set title and vassal change type and set add claim on loss, integrating them into create title and vassal change instead. This lets us ensure that all title and vassal changes are properly set up and log errors at read time if you forget to set the transfer type. Removed unused description system from doctrine groups. Scripted GUIs used by the AI can have an AI frequency in months defined for how often they will be evaluated like character interactions. The character history ID link now no longer logs an error on runtime if the character doesn't exist. When used in an event target comparison, it will instead error during load time if referencing someone who isn't in the history database at all. The AI values tooltip in debug mode now shows which rough budget categories the AI has put its money into. The AI will do of call ally interaction is now respected by the AI. The onActions in title onActions txt, except on title destroyed, now provide scope transfer type so you can determine how the title vassal change happened. To make the above optimization possible, none of them work with barons or baronies anymore. You can now use in place in line of succession for when you really do want to check equality, since equal will throw an error since usually it makes little sense. Do GHW title handout now also handles de jure vassalization. Ex-traveling family member now includes adult children too. The trigger event effect now supports delayed equal yes or no. Update the info doc for character interactions. The AI desire for matrilinear marriages is now scriptable through the AI wants matrilinear marriage scripted rule. Added trigger domain size excluding grace period. Map editor, map object editor, UX improvements, group by layer more compact. Map editor, map object editor. Can create, edit, delete map objects types in editor. Map editor, export and import tool added for merging map changes by area. Map editor starts up faster. Map editor claims less memory. Map editor cursor change while editor is saving. Map editor hide map can be reloaded while in editor. Databases. Added Saka culture to the Tarim Basin. Added additional rulers in Sapmi for both bookmarks, both to add more variety with independent tribes as well as splitting up the large realm of the Finnish ruler in Ulu. Added the Gayi circuit as an independent realm in 867 to better represent the history of the area in and surrounding Zia. Afar and Somali cultures now start the game with their men-at-arms innovation unlocked. Aquitaine now has Salic law, male-only title-specific succession in 867. Changed Andrew the Apostle culture from Scots to Greek. Changed a few Prussian dynasties names to sound less German. Changed a few additional counties in eastern Cumania to be of Kipchak culture. Changed the names for a couple of duchies in eastern Germany. Ostmark is now named Nordmark, while previous Nordmark is named Mecklenburg, the Billung Mark. Connected the Benin dynasty to its founder to avoid a disconnected dynasty tree. Akendaye of the Benin dynasty no longer lives to be more than 200 years old, causing her to still be alive in 1066. She now passes away at a more reasonable age. Fixed the Count of Grisons accidentally being independent in 867. Fixed 2 dukes of Poland being presented as full kings between 1031 and 1058. House of Wittelsbach is now playable in 1066. Otto I, Count of Cheyenne, has been granted the county of Rothenburg, which encompasses the area of Cheyenne Castle. Improved the historical setup for Mosul in 867. Improvements in Cumania in 1066. A couple of fictional vassals was added to reduce the Khan's domain size and avoid vassals with a disjointed realm. Kashmiri culture no longer starts with elephantry unlocked, since they are mostly situated outside the subcontinent of India. Karate culture now start the game with the elephantry innovation unlocked. Lutetia is now independent in 1066 to represent the Slavic uprising. Made several changes to the de jure setup in sub-Saharan Africa. Made several government updates to the Russian principalities and their vassals. They are now consistently feudal, with occasional tribe vassals to represent recent or semi-recent conquests. Made sure that Khazar still has counties of the culture in 1066 within the Kingdom of Caucasus. Made the island of Socotra de jure to the Duchy of Socotra. Members of the Contarini dynasty are now Cisalpine. Ostyak and Permian cultures now have the man-at-arms innovation Forest Warden unlocked in 1066. Prince Ibrahim Aglabit of the Sultanate of Africa is now a vassal under his father. Rodri the Great Stad, Merfin, is now suitably oppressive. Ruler of Nisus is no longer tribal in 1066. Saint Peter now keeps the name Petrus upon becoming the first pope instead of getting a random papal name. Sami culture now starts with a cultural man-at-arms unlocked in 867 and 2 additional innovations in 1066. Tangut characters Xingye Posho and Fuyun Azang Kuhai are no longer both married and betrothed. The dynamically named Child of Concubine consort trait has been split into separate Child of Concubine and Child of Consort traits. The ruler of Magdeburg is now a theocracy in 1066. Updated and fixed several holding types within Tibet. Updated and fixed the names of Popes Eugenius II and III. Updated and improved the Palabian setup, mainly in 867, and added a number of Palabian names for the area to have less German names under Palabian rule. Updated history for Rethel and its historical rulers. Updated the culture setup in the steppes slightly. Update the history and setup for the Karakhanids. Various improvements and changes have been made to the history of the western half of Byzantium in 1066 to more accurately represent the themes used at the time. Volga Bulgaria is now feudal in 1066 to represent the fact that they were more sedentary than not, especially when compared to their nomadic neighbors. Correct the date of birth of Alfred's youngest daughter so that she is no longer his eldest. Gave the House of Wessex a fixed motto. Slightly adjusted insularist setup in 867 Scotland. Update the Kingdom of Sau's coat of arms. Corrected the Safarid-Tahirid war to make the Safarid the attacker rather than defender. If the Safarid successfully win the war, they will gain the duchies of Herat and Nishapur. Daju culture no longer has the early medieval era unlocked in 1066. Split up the much too big Viking count north of Sweden in 1066 into smaller realms. Updated a number of holdings in Bohemia 867 to have the holding type match the ruler's government. Updated several holdings in East Africa to be tribal if held by tribal rulers at game start. The province of Zeeland now begins under the control of the HRE in 1066. Bug fixes. AI will ignore unit targets in attrition areas. Cancelling construction that costs prestige or piety no longer gives you fame or devotion just the prestige piety costs back. Don't count the court physician in the relationship tab as a relation. Fix not being able to reform your faith with the same doctrines. Entirely different doctrines is only required if creating a new faith instead of reforming one. Fix temporal head of faith titles not following the player heir if the realm heir differs from the player heir from an elective primary title. Fix the mass ransom button being usable when the person we ransom to cannot pay the gold. Fix the player heir not always being at the passed on house head if the player heir and realm heir differ due to a primary title being elective. Fix the prisoner action buttons not always matching up to if the interaction could be done. Fix the special contracts, march, etc. having the incorrect name until you had the right innovations for them. Fix unnecessarily handling controller input and rotating zooming the camera. This will avoid some issues with black maps after loading into the game if the connected controller constantly sent unexpected inputs. Fix war participant tooltip not listing the number of knights but just repeating the word knight. Fix divorce not being available if your faith requires divorce approval by the spiritual head of faith, but you don't have a spiritual head of faith, no head, or temporal head. Fix great holy wars in some cases resulting in the Crusader king unlanding before beneficiary to get the capital, rather than just directly getting the capital in the first place. Fixed an issue where a modifier for elective voting would not print text properly. Fixed characters of the non-dominant gender of a faith getting claims of their dying parent's title, e.g., now men won't get such claims in a female-dominated faith. Fixed characters who change liege not always getting properly updated. This could, for instance, lead to their liege's vassal limit usage not updating. Fixed excommunication being available for faiths with communion but non-spiritual heads. Fixed factions not disbanding when they lose or white peace their faction war. Fixed granting and unlanded character titles in rare cases causing them to become independent. Fixed house and dynasty modifiers never expiring when they have an expiry date. Fixed it being possible to give your primary heir titles they won't get in partition by first giving them a title that they will get in the petition. Fixed it in some cases being possible to, on your death, continue playing as someone who didn't actually inherit any titles from you. Fixed it in some cases being possible to revoke on a character's last county while they still hold a higher tier title. Fixed it in some cases not being possible to revoke a character's last duchy or higher. Fixed merging units together, ignoring knights for the purpose of supplies, leading to merging armies of just knights, causing them to lose all supplies. Fixed newly created and historical characters that start with a focus being considered to already have changed it once, preventing you from changing it again in the case of childhood focuses. Fixed people who lose land in a war, sometimes erroneously ending up as a vassal of the conqueror. Fixed prestige gain from alive house and dynasty members getting their monthly prestige gain modifier applied twice. Fixed several issues of text overflowing in the UI in some languages. Fixed siege phase time and moral loss modifiers applying via the owner of the holding, e.g., the owner has military engineer trade would make it faster for others to siege their holdings. Fixed sieges not immediately starting if a hostile army is standing in a holding that ceases to be occupied, e.g., due to a third-party war and resolving. Fixed taking someone's primary title, sometimes unlanding them entirely, even though they should still have vassals to steal a county from. Fixed taking the last physical land of a spiritual head of faith, causing the head of faith title to be destroyed. Fixed the game in some cases, like the disallow marriage checkbox, thinking people have been rulers for far longer than they actually have been. Fixed the game in some cases, blocking interactions saying you is already considering a proposal from you after interacting with yourself. Fixed the game in some cases, releasing people from prison when it shouldn't, such as when they become rulers. Fixed vassals in some cases going independent or becoming a vassal of your liege if your primary title has its own succession laws and doesn't go to the same heir as the rest of your realm. Giving out a title well above your domain limit will no longer give you stress. Previously, it gave you stress without warning you. Guests with claims no longer accept staying if you propose to press a claim that you cannot declare a war for. It is no longer possible for the county capital's fort level to go below 1, which would render it unsiegeable. Made the Crusader helmet show up in the barbershop. Remove incorrect warning about adjacent vassal contract levels if its display method is a radio button and they are unique picks already. The Promote Christian Settlement decision now gives Hungarian culture all innovations and innovation progress of Moya culture. The Reclaim Britannia decision no longer changes effects based on de jure drift. Titles with title-specific succession laws, e.g. male preference, that match your realm law are no longer considered separate when calculating petition splits, so they'll no longer always go to your primary heir unless the law is actually distinct from your realm laws. Vassals of vassals are now able to declare war on vassals of their liege's liege. When your spouse is also your heir in your latest save, we don't clone them to show them twice in the main menu. Your children will no longer leave your court just because they're bold, so daughters won't run off in a male-dominated society, and sons won't run off in a female-dominated society. A head of faith will no longer forsake their religion if your spouse is charming enough. A bastard born to a landed woman and a landed man will now get a her house as default. A betrothal in your own court will no longer be talked about as a marriage. A faction will no longer courteously greet you before calling you a tyrant. A sealess character will now sweat a bit about committing adultery. Added a 10-year cooldown to childhood events if the child decides to kill the animal instead of adopting it, you monsters. Added a cooldown to the Know Thyself upcoming death event to reduce the level of spamming telling you about being at death's door. Added a text variant for placing a vassal under house arrest. Added a trigger in one of the options for Clan .1201 so that rulers can't give away their only title in the name of diversity. Added an alert for when you have no player heir to your titles, but there's someone in your dynasty who can inherit. Added encyclopedia link for attrition in a tooltip. Added grandparent checks to scheme modifiers. Added in events about upgrading relationships. Updated conditions for rival in seduction events so they don't bonk you in the head while imprisoned. Added missing background to the event domain of debauchery. Added missing arrow icon next to the Holy War for county when piety level is sinner. Added missing perspectives to effect lock. Added missing tooltip about prestige loss in rival upgrade event. Added prisoner and jailer to custom lock key and trigger. Added triggers to notifications so that martial vassals don't gain opinion of themselves when they do something good. Agent and scheme is now properly exposed. Alawites and Chromations may no longer go on Harch, though they have access to pilgrimages as usual. All Harch events now have the pilgrimage activity theme. An imprisoned vassal will no longer scream about rebellion. Apply army maintenance modifiers to unraised man-at-arms reinforcement cost. Assyrians no longer have access to cataphracts. Austria and Switzerland will now be correctly drifted into a restored Carolingian Empire. Babies will no longer be assigned commander traits through a yearly event. Barons married to other landed characters will no longer be naked. Bastards can no longer create cadet branches. Betrothal toast will now trigger if either participant isn't an adult. Blocked Vlach rulers from taking the Unite the Slavs and Unite the Southern Slavs decisions. Block the Making Acquaintances event and its options if the child already has all the traits opposites that they can get from the event. Block the seduction of characters who are imbeciles or incapable. Butcher culture now starts with Mubarazan unlocked in 1066. Byzantine characters now use royal headgear instead of ducal headgear. Calm doesn't like impatient. Capital duchy modifiers are now correctly recalculated after moving the capital or destroying the duchy. Character modifiers coming from difficulty settings are now applied correctly when loading save games and starting multiplayer games. Characters are now more reluctant or outright forbidden from leaving their partners behind. Characters can no longer get different tiers of the same congenital trait. Characters that should be naked no longer wear cloaks. Characters using the Northern Portrait set no longer toss away their crown when they become emperors. Characters will no longer be as desperate for your friendship in foreign special diplomacy event. Characters will no longer be doubly motivated to murder to move up the succession. Child preacher in event must be of age 4 or older. Children are no longer allowed to partake in an intrigue challenge event. Children are no longer encouraged to pick up more spouses. Children can no longer be educated by hardened criminals. Children can no longer be granted a bishopric as they are too young to handle both managerial tasks and religious duties. Children can no longer start a literalist debate. Children, imprisoned, and incapable vassals can no longer demand that you host a feast. Clarified the development growth modifier from the terrain in the county capital to specify the capital holding name instead of simply the county name. Clarified the name for the different culture group opinion penalty by making it say foreign culture group rather than culture. Cleaning up cooldown for the befriend scheme. Clicking the too few spouses issue now opens the find spouse into action. Compassionate character are now told that blackmailing people is stressful. Corrected several holding names in Europe. County task icon tooltip no longer shows big MTR when there's no counselor for that task. Courtiers can now marry even if they're out and about. Courtiers of theocracies and mercenaries will no longer wear inappropriate clothes. Crusader helmets will now always show up when appropriate. Devouring people will now have a clearer impact on your stress level. Don't apply army maintenance modifiers to prestige cost. Dukes now understand that an emperor can be their rightful liege when they're deciding if they want to join an independence faction. It just never ends. Dynasty heads, house heads, can now only use the special calls to war for conflicts where they are primary participant and the target is not already involved. Enable the Nowruz festival event for all Iranian culture group characters instead of only Persians. Established Norman culture decision now have the effects displayed. Event childhood point 1002 no longer triggers if child has both traits that the event can give. Excommunicated characters can no longer take the vows. Family members of prisoners will now be miffed if you snatch the prisoner up as your concubine consort. Feudal elective nominations now check the title holder's liege's laws when determining eligible candidates. First marriage event is not blocked from triggering multiple times for divorcees. Fix court bishop income tooltip when using theocratic lees. Fix AIs caving to populist demands when they really shouldn't. Fix Scalloway using incorrect cultural names. Fix Unify the Burgundies preventing culture conversion if the character was already Octane. Fix the bug sometimes preventing concubines from being shown properly in the marriage window. Fix the bug that caused the ransom prisoner event to occasionally display the payer's current gold total instead of the actual amount of gold they paid in ransom. Fix the bug that prevented counties from joining claimant factions. Fix the bug where the faith of an attacker in a holy war did not lose fervor when that attacker was defeated. Fix the bug where there would be a small gap between neck and torso at lower levels of body fat. Fix a bunch of errors popping during runtime. Fix a couple of decisions not refunding the prestige cost properly if the player opts out. Fix a couple of scheme events for landed characters firing for unlanded characters. Fix the localization error in the Holy War casus belli effects that refer to the attacker's vassals as your vassals, even when you were the defender. Fix a typo in the Spain United event. Fix an error which caused the event differences in faith to trigger for counties of your own religion. Fix an error with the Unite the Slavs decision that prevented the de jure drift effect from working correctly. Fix an event stating that your lover revealed your secret when you in fact did it yourself by claiming a bastard as your own. Fix an inverted value that caused children with bad education affinity to do better at that education than children with a good affinity. Fix an issue with the CB cost breakdown not showing properly for the independent CB. Fix behavior in the achievements window. Fix being able to send multiple blackmail interactions to the same character while waiting for the first response. Fix broken capitalization in house and dynasty tooltips when you are the house or dynasty head. Fix broken god reference in a death transition text. Fix children with pre-existing guardians not being selected by default when using offer guardianship on them. Fix embracing English culture sometimes converting landed spouses of all family members without their consent. Fix faulty gender of a Roman. Fix imprisoned characters sometimes being chosen to be mercenary captains or holy order grandmasters. Fix lock and seduction event. Fix lowborns getting kinslayer traits when murdering other lowborns. Fix perspectives for a number of interaction triggers. Fix runtime errors in script. Fix some errors with tutorial concepts in the encyclopedia. Fix some rank tier game concept confusion. Fix some siege logic that was causing infinite sieges in allied land when it was a part of the enemy realm. Fix sorting knights by name in the battle overview window. And it still goes on. Seriously, this does never end. Fix the AI recruiting guests because they themselves had a good claim rather than the guest. Fix the kingdom of Pontus capital being set outside its de jure area. Fix the capital is now set as Trebizond. Fix the kingdom of Pontus capital being set outside its de jure area. The capital is now set as Trebizond. Fix the mixed usage of possessive pronouns in the notification for allied combatants captured. Fix the revoke title interaction so that it shows titles properly in the interface. Fix the show hide invalid save games logic. Fix typo the name for the county of Padua, which was incorrectly named Paduan. Fixed up some grammar when exposing secrets. Great Holy War title recipients who own the target title will no longer conquer it from themselves. Gnosticism's stress loss for granting titles now scales correctly. Guardian remove themselves from guardianship if their ward is imprisoned. Guardians will no longer keep teaching your kids after fleeing the realm. Guests with claims on your vassals' titles will no longer arrive due to these claims. Harsh decision has unique text to distinguish itself from the normal pilgrimage decision. Head of Faith looks at incest as a divorce reason based on faith's doctrines. Highborn people will now be more skeptical about marrying lowborns. Hindu Shahis are correctly feudal now. Historical characters will no longer be their own parent. Holstein moved to Saxony, Germany, due to being pre-Danish union, mostly. If people start to murder your courtiers, the experience will now be much smoother. If you instantly regret romancing someone, the game will now accept that you've moved on. If you promise a vassal to educate their child, they will now be miffed if you try to return the child. If you're trying to elect a kinslayer as your heir, you will now get a functional tooltip. If your liege declares war on your war target, your war is invalidated. Imprisoned AI rulers will now attempt to ransom themselves. Imprisoning someone for having a secret lover when it's criminal does not cause tyranny when done via a secret exposed event. Infertile spouses will now no longer wish each other a long life and many children. Intended achievements where you need to start as a particular can now also be accomplished after the character's death. Interaction acceptance now considers personality once. Intrigue event about Sealer's agent now exposes the scheme as well as the agent if you fail the duel. It's now possible to negotiate an alliance even if your family is very inbred. Khotan and Zungaria now start entirely feudalized rather than partially clan. Knights that kill or wound commanders now have a chance to increase their prowess, gain prestige. Khoristan is now appropriately vassalized to Turov, the local tribal power. Landless nuns now wear habits. Level of Splendor will no longer give zero acceptance in marriages. Losing a Liberty War now only gives the attacking faction members a hook on their liege instead of everyone attacking the liege, which included participants of completely different wars. Lovers exposed during feasts have a trigger to ensure none of them are imprisoned at the time. Lowborn bastards no longer try to belong to a house. Lower the amount of gold the recipient needs to have to unlock the demand payment interaction. Lower the penalty for negotiating an alliance with your primary heir. Made sure effects are applied to the correct scope in rival upgrade events. Made sure marriage actions look for consort instead of concubine. And on we go! Made sure reformed faiths get new shiny icon. Made sure that all lock strings in the game are localized. Make a sieging standing army use proper siege animations. Also play victory animation when winning a siege. Married couples will no longer be exposed as if they have an affair if they're also lovers. Mercenary and Holy Order captains will now abdicate from their positions when getting titles. Millet faiths have same-sex relations set to shunned by default. More events now take place at the proper location. More information given if a new religious movement is founded. Moved blocking traits from declare bloodline holy decision to be stress impacts instead. Move the effects of the Convert County Task conclusion event into the immediate block to stop the event script from overwriting player changes between the event firing and resolving. Mystic will no longer stick their nose in religious matters that are of no concern to them. Naughty children go straight to jail with no education. Negative opinions for concubines or polygamous marriages now specifically checks for number of spouses and concubines. Neighboring ruler war resolution message will now name the war. Newly made nuns monks are only sent to monastery of the faiths or to the Legis pool. Nicephorus Palaiologos is no longer Duke of Bulgaria in 1066. No more distance education. Non-relevant mercenaries should no longer use the palace guards culture men-at-arms. Now check for the correct scope when blocking attempts on joining one's ally in a war against one's liege. Now show the correct name when offering the opportunity to ransom a character that's not landed. Now showing the culture or religion trigger for restoring the Roman Empire decision as it didn't print correctly as a tooltip. Only the Byzantine emperor now wears the imperial crown. Order members cannot be asked to rejoin a holy order. Outrima culture no longer discovers up to 7 new innovations every time a new ruler adopts it. Outrima culture now correctly retains all innovations that its parent culture has discovered instead of only some of them. Hekenak ruling dynasty now relates to Khan Kura. People are now less eager to marry people they are terrified of. People that are terrified of you are now more likely to agree to marriage as long as they don't have to marry you. People will no longer judge you harshly for breaking a betrothal to a eunuch. Decisions are no longer in 2 places at once when sick. Pilgrimage decisions preview will now give the correct minimum sum you will have to pay. Players now get notifications about their right-hand person. Player unit graphics are now prioritized over other unit graphics when they occupy the same position. Players' reaction to someone recovering from illness is now based on the relationship with the character and the previous sick person's opinion of the player. Populist uprising wars no longer invalidate on succession if the new liege does not personally hold the target title. Prevent call to war when loading save with some incorrect landed state. Prioritize what call to war interaction and action to show. Properly clear occupations when liege invalidates vassal's war by attacking the same target. Rebuffing the advances of a romantic interest now correctly ends their scheme instead of forcing you to become soulmates anyway. Reforming to feudal now grants the same amount of random buildings as previously built in the province. Refusing to attend a feast when faith has ritual celebrations tenet now results in loss of piety rather than devotion. Relocated an oddly positioned tooltip when refusing a blackmail threat from another player in a multiplayer game. Removed an outdated reference to an old button in the fabricating claims reactive advice. Removed anachronistic Magius from Pannonia in 867. Removed excess slaughtering from Iberian mercenary names. Removed excessive warning in Take Stewardship of the Sacred River decision. Removed incorrect holy sites of Jerusalem, Mosul, and Mecca from Yazidism. Replaced them with more suitable unique holy sites in Zinjar, Baalbek, and Lalish. Removed incorrect info about fabricating claims from the Title Interrogation Council Task Tooltip. Removed redundant tooltip when offering to join a war you're already fighting in. Removed some game log spam in multiplayer. Remove the is diplomatically available from the is shown trigger for temporal condemnation so that its failed conditions are only shown when failed. Remove the multiple message and variations of the same condition for attempting to join or create a faction when underage. Replace the fake Mogi half-art names. Required baronies and befriending events are now checked for in the event trigger. Reshape the Thar Desert slightly for a better setup and to connect the counties of Ludrava and Vikramapura to one another. Restructured how bastard secrets are exposed to ensure that the piety loss, opinion loss from adultery only happens once. Reworked and clarified a condition for faith reformation and head of faith title creation. Holy sites must be within your realm and held by you or vassals of your faith. Right trait is now referenced in elections. Ram now no longer takes dynasty names, always retaining its title name regardless of the holder's culture. Saladin's helmet, DDE, will now appear for marshals of Duke Plus rank and Duke Plus rulers leading an army, as it's too opulent and fancy for common knights. Same Faith only has one entry in the laws section of the encyclopedia. Secret exposure notification now removes the correct hook. Show both siege weapon and standing unit during siege if army has siege weapons. Show maximum possible tax and levies for bishop in the endorsement tooltip. Sick characters now dress the part. Sneaky people will now wear sneaky clothes. Socotra and its historical rulers are Yemeni instead of Bedouin. Splendor levels are no longer over-explained in the encyclopedia. Split the take vows decision into two, one for asking someone to go to a holy order, the other to a monastery. Spouse will no longer reveal their own scheme or a scheme they're part of. Spread Assyrian culture a little. Spy masters will no longer try to dig up dirt on themselves. Steward can no longer target themselves when discovering a claim for their liege. Stop swearing fealty to the Mongol Khan, ending the wrong wars. Stress gain, loss from deceased siblings is now calculated before friendship, lover, rivalry, opinion modifiers are deleted. Stricter checks on titles so that one does not give away their primary title in an event in the name of diversity. Sven II of Denmark now spawns as either bisexual or heterosexual. Temujin's kids will no longer be educated child prodigies. The Form the Swiss Confederation decision can now be undertaken even if the Holy Roman Empire doesn't exist. The new cultural eratos will now show the correct culture's cultural head character. The cannibalism decision can now only be taken once per faith. The former Outremer decision now correctly transfers all innovations known by your former culture to the new Outremer culture. Nope, and here we go. Another page. The I am not done with you yet option in torture events will now apply the correct effects. The pacifism and dharmic pacifism tenets now correctly provide +1 domain limit to all adherents. The too few knights warning will now only appear when you have too few knights, not when you have too many. The unrepresented event now only fires for clans and cannot poach lands from player characters. The AI will now shy further away from all marriage partners. The arranged marriage screen now allows you to toggle the matrilineal checkbox prior to selecting recipient. The Catholic Pope now wears the correct clothes. The consecrate bloodline decision now gives the bloodline trait to descendants even if the family tree has dead members. The decision to unify Iberia now displays the condition that you must have an Iberian kingdom as your primary title. The domestic affairs task now correctly gives an opinion boost of your direct vassals if you vassal yourself. The embracing abandoning celibacy and searching for physician decisions are now available even when commanding an army. The exclave independence game rule no longer fails if the heir of a dead character is at war for 5+ years. The head of faith can no longer excommunicate themselves. The Jewish head of faith now wears the correct clothes. The Mongol Empire will no longer destroy itself when winning a war. The Mongol Empire will now always declare the correct wars when arriving. The Pope can no longer publicly accept cannibalism. The Pope will now always wear the correct clothes. The council window resets to the player council tab when opened so that the empty council position works correctly. The death notification toasts now show death reasons properly. They are always delayed to the next event tick after the death happens now. It was inconsistent before. The decision to create the Kingdom of Israel can only be done once per campaign. The Declare War window will no longer show claimant CBs for characters whose claims can't actually be used. The distance check for joining Holy Wars now checks realm border to war target distance instead of capital to capital distance. The duration of the private army from your spouse is now determined by the martial skill rating. The elope scheme will now run smoother. The enabled criteria for special buildings will now always show up. The event faction organizing no longer fires for factions you're already at war with. The event for discovering bastard secrets now mentions the bastard by name and shows their portrait in the bottom left. The game will no longer tell you to take more concubines when you've had enough. The potential guardian to a ward who is a courtier now checks if the ward or requester is of interest to them. To educate the courtier of a count is of no interest to a foreign emperor. The tutorial widget in the bookmark window will no longer show up for a fraction of a second when opening that window for the first time. Toast about once foreign guest enjoying the dance is now displayed properly. Tooltip Cleanup 4. Two players have a child together will no longer have a screaming competition about the name. Tyranny now also gets added even if the vassal declines the title revocation. Unlanded characters will no longer have random dungeons. Updated Reclaim Britannia decision. Updated localization for a councillor being blocked from being fired from the council. Updated localization for culture innovation effects. Updated localization for culture promotion modifier. Holy! I will never get this video out. Updated requirements for creating the Empire of Germania to give correct tooltip. Update the event log for an insulting accusation to imply the character's beliefs in the vassal's innocence. Updated the location triggers for befriend outcomes so the correct location can be fetched when trying to befriend unlanded characters as an independent ruler. Vassals and lieges no longer receive a penalty to negotiate alliance when you're already at war. Vassals can no longer call their liege into their own wars. War important actions and suggestions will no longer show up when the player is in debt. Warning about your realm priest not endorsing you will no longer lie about levies. West Slavic cultures are now easier to differentiate on the map. When being courted by a pregnant woman, the option to bring you a wolf pelt is unavailable unless your religion allows for women combatants. Fix an issue when opening the marriage window for the first time and the player would get the wrong default sort order. When requesting gold in exchange for ending a war at the behest of your liege, the show gold amount now correctly corresponds with what you actually receive. When setting title color from another title, shift it more so gradient border is always present. When the Generate Families game rule is on, rulers who had a spouse and children generated will no longer receive the wedding event after game start. Witches can now host a grand rite. Women will no longer be punished for having too few consorts. You are no longer malnourished and obese for life. You can no longer demand conversion from imprisoned foreign rulers. You can no longer ask your househead to approve your divorce if you are the househead. Just do it. You can no longer attempt to find dead people's secrets. You can no longer be tortured to confess a secret you don't know. You can no longer demand liberty from a chill liege. You can no longer grant a vassal who's at war with the recipient. You can no longer lose a friend you didn't have. You can no longer owe a favor to yourself because of a necklace. You can no longer remove your vassal's guardians all nilly-willy. You can now condemn your vassal for the sins even if you're pious. You can now declare war for your claims while in prison. You can now help your allies in religious wars they start. You can now marry your concubines' consorts without having to dismiss them first. You can now only call people of the right faith to great holy wars. You can now scheme to claim thrones even while feasting. You can now take other rulers' concubines as your concubines if you've imprisoned them. You no longer is the real father, you are the real father. You now kick hostile holy orders from your holdings with a few choice words. Your wife will now leave your kids behind if she flees your tyranny. You will no longer be encouraged to give away your last county. You will no longer be stressed out if a spouse you dislike dies. You will no longer be told twice about your ransom offer being accepted. You will no longer call newly independent rulers your vassal. You will no longer get a broken event if your liege declares war against someone you're already warring with. You will no longer have to spend the rest of your life fabricating one hook. You will no longer refer to someone else's claims as your own. You will no longer think less or more of yourself depending on how good you are at romancing someone else. Nope, I think I'm going to be sitting here next week still. You will now be told only once that you've successfully blackmailed someone. You will now be told why you can't debate people 24/7. You will now only be notified of the establishment of Norman culture if you're in Europe. You will no longer get events in third person about how virtuous you are. Your de jure liege is no longer called your de jure vassal. Your mentor will no longer ditch you in the middle of your education. Zealous people are no longer more likely to say goodbye to their religion. Adaptive tenet now correctly requires you to have a pluralist religious attitude. Added Welsh Cumbrian cultural names for Hereford and Herefordshire. Add an extremely minor piety cost for changing to a different version of Muhammad's succession. Added missing children to Alfred the Great. Adjusted 867 Bulgarian de facto setup and history. Adjusted historical and de facto setup for Wales in 867, making South Wales more fractious and splitting up Deheubarth. Hewell-ap-Rees retains the duchy in 867, even though Deheubarth wasn't technically founded until 920, to represent the waning but still extant power of the Margaret kings. Since we use the duchy as kind of a catch-all for the most powerful southern Welsh realm. Adjusted luck and circumstances surrounding acquisition of the Hajj trade, basing it on who could undertake the Hajj rather than being for all Muslims. Adjusted localization in one of the Claim Throne scheme events to remove erroneous title references. Allowed Shire Zandaka heresies to crop up in Shire counties more consistently. Barontier rulers no longer display their request claimant action. Betrothed will no longer attempt to divorce when one is made concubine. Blind characters can no longer become knights. Blocked off promote Christian settlements decision in 1066, as has already happened. Characters will no longer easily ransom characters they are at war with if asked to do so by said character's liege. Corrected several edge cases related to creation of a de jure target kingdom title versus a titular one. Corrected various duchy holders having no land in the appropriate duchies without good reason. Counts are properly assigned to the de jure dukes after successful Great Holy Wars. Destroyed kingdom titles when uniting the West Slavs now have their de jure drift into your primary kingdom title. Extended CN issues. Cultural name to Armenian. Forming out Rima now requires you to be specifically king tier, a non-Byzantine group culture, and only control half the Arabian Peninsula. K Austria and E France can now maintain their primogeniture after obtaining it via decision. Made Ethelred I significantly more unlucky whilst Alfred is alive and heir. Made dismantle empire decisions use a standard decision cost flow rather than stealth grabbing 10k prestige on declaration. Made form the Archduchy of Austria easier, more flexible and slightly less anachronistic. Made C. Madoi fully tribal in 1066. Made cannibalism more hygienic and mod-friendly. Made D. Takerer clan in 1066. Made D. Gigulov tribal in 1066. Made forming Switzerland easier, cheaper, more flexible and more historical. May only join holy war defenders who are either of your own faith or which are being prosecuted against someone within your religion who you could not holy war yourself. Needed clan tribal divides in the Horn of Africa. Reduced mild anachronisms in 867 East Francia along Saxon borders. Reduced verbosity of mend the schism decision. There's the end! We almost did it! Removed Aragon's duchy from Unified Burgundy's decision. Removed duplicate cost checks and requirements list from several decisions. Removed inappropriate prestige piety requirements from a number of old decisions. Replaced incorrect piety requirements in some decisions with piety level requirements. Restoring the Holy Roman Empire can no longer be done using a hook on cooldown. Restoring the Holy Roman Empire can no longer be done whilst at war with your head of faith. Restoring the Holy Roman Empire no longer requires holding the electors. Restoring the Holy Roman Empire will now apply gender exclusion laws correctly, according to faith preference. Restoring the Holy Roman Empire will now de jure drift all of Germania into the Holy Roman Empire, if Germania does not already exist at the time. Reworked Norse-Norwegian names in Norway and North Atlantic to be more accurate. Sanitized all Welsh places names to use Welsh as standard with English normal cultural names. Split feudalizing tribes important action out from wrong holding important action. Split the family of Bledry out of the royal family of David. Spouses can no longer be both happy and unhappy with a spouse when at exactly -20 opinion of them whilst being seduced. Stop non-familial guests showing up in your court if they have claims on your titles. Stop revealed parents losing ×3 piety levels instead of ×1 in bastardry secret reveals. Temporal head of faith titles now require independence or a liege of sufficient tier to create. The Patriarch of the East now claims to be a patriarch, not a pope. The Patriarchs of the East were now Assyrian, not Mashriki. Titular Crusade titles are now properly assigned where appropriate instead of doubling up or confiscating non-titular titles. Transferred Memel from Courland to Samogitiya. Unify the Burgundies will now only convert your culture to Occitan if you weren't already Occitan. Warhorse modifier is properly applied. The Ecumenical Patriarch now wears the correct clothes. Added a clarifying tooltip for the second option in the Family Epic Rich Source Material event. Added trigger to check for already known secrets when trying to reveal secrets as stress relief. An appropriate sexuality is now set based on the sex of one's crush in the case where one gets a crush before realizing one's sexuality. Barony location now shows its name when attempting to befriend independent rulers. Checking rivalry relationships before adding appropriate rivalry modifier on a yearly event. Having concubines no longer protects you from forcefully becoming a concubine. Seduction compliments now only has 2 outcomes, good or bad. The Sicilian Parliament and Hall of Heroes are now built on the correct type of building slots. Walking dog modifier is removed when dog dies. Removed double tooltip text for befriend interaction if you're already friends. Fixed an OOS related to stress events potentially using unsafe randomly generated numbers. Fixed missing text in an event option in a Murders at Court story cycle event. The founding of a holy order as the Canossa is saved as a global flag for the Give a Dog a Bone achievement. Vassals who agree to a conversion demand during a heresy outbreak can no longer immediately reconvert to the heresy. We did it! Holy moly! My goodness, that took forever. I thought I was literally sitting here for hours. I think I was sitting here for hours. In any case, this was the massive patch for Crusader Kings 3 1.1. Those were the patch notes. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like for me to read more patch notes so that you don't have to. Let me know. And also, what's your favorite change of all of these changes and fixes? What have you been waiting for? I'll see you in the next video. Consolamentum tenet. Consolamentum.